Have you ever wondered what you are worth to my parents? My value was $0. For 24 years, I was a breathing machine programmed to serve my brother. But at New York's most lavish wedding, a trembling hand lifted my chin. The most powerful man in the room looked at me like a ghost. I was not a servant. I was the nightmare my fake parents had buried. My revenge began with a single look. My name is Evelyn Withers. I am 24 years old, and I exist in the crawl space between the roof and the ceiling of the Vance Manor, while the rest of the Hamptons sleep under the cool, climate-controlled hum of central air conditioning. My room remains a stifling box of stagnant heat. It is an attic in the truest sense, unfinished floorboards that groan under my weight, insulation peeling from the rafters like sunburned skin, and a single, circular window that looks out not at the ocean, but at the exhaust vents of the garage. At 4 o'clock in the morning, the alarm on my digital wristwatch vibrates against my wrist. I do not let it beep. Sound travels strangely in this house, and waking Arthur or Sylvia before their scheduled time is a sin punishable by days of silent treatment and colder meals. I slide out of my cot, my feet hitting the rough wood. There is no time to linger on the fatigue that settles deep in my bones. The Vance family requires perfection, and perfection takes time. My morning routine is a military operation performed in a housecoat that has seen better decades. I creep down the servants' staircase, a narrow, spiraling thing hidden behind the pantry, and enter the kitchen. It is a pristine laboratory of marble and stainless steel, cold and uninviting. My first task is breakfast. It must be healthy, organic, and visually indistinguishable from a magazine spread. I measure out exactly 50 grams of steel-cut oats for Arthur. I slice avocados for Sylvia with the precision of a surgeon, ensuring each crescent is identical in thickness. Then comes the kale and ginger juice, which must be pressed fresh, ensuring no pulp remains to offend their delicate palates. But the cooking is the easy part. The absurdity of my life truly begins with the newspaper. The Vances subscribe to 3 major papers, not because they read them, but because they like the aesthetic of them lying on the mahogany side table. However, Arthur cannot stand the feel of newsprint ink on his fingers, nor does he tolerate the crinkle of a fresh page. So, at 4:30 in the morning, I stand at the ironing board. I place a thin cotton sheet over the financial section and press the iron down. I iron the newspaper. I smooth out every crease, every fold, baking the ink into the paper so it will not smudge on Arthur's cuffs. It is a task that takes 40 minutes. It is a task that makes me want to scream. But I remain silent. The steam rises, smelling of hot paper and futility. Next are the shoes, Caleb's shoes. My brother, though, he would recoil if he heard me call him that, publicly owns a collection of Italian leather that costs more than what most families earn in a year. Caleb Vance is 26 years old. He is the golden prince of this kingdom, a man who believes the world was paved specifically for him to walk on. He works, theoretically, as a vice president at Vance Global, the boutique financial firm our parents founded. In reality, the firm is a shell, a glossy brochure with very few actual clients, sustained by loans and the illusion of generational wealth. I sit on a stool in the mudroom, polishing Caleb's Oxfords, until I can see the reflection of my own tired eyes in the black leather. Small circles, wax on, wax off. My hands are stained dark, the smell of chemical polish filling my nose. This is my penance. This is my rent. You should be grateful, Evelyn, Sylvia often tells me, usually while sipping wine I poured for her. We took you in when you were nothing, a shivering little rat from the state orphanage. We gave you a roof. We gave you a name. You owe us your life. They have repeated this lie so many times that for the first 2 decades of my life, I believed it. I believed I was a charity case. I believed that the reason I was not allowed to eat at the dining table, the reason I wore Caleb's cast-off t-shirts, the reason I had never seen the inside of a real school, was because I was inherently less than them. They did not beat me with belts. They beat me with words. They constructed a mirror explicitly for me. one that reflected a distorted image: Evelyn the ugly, Evelyn the slow-witted, Evelyn the servant. "You have a face for the back of the house," Arthur told me once when I was 16, and asked if I could get a haircut at a salon instead of having Sylvia hack at it with kitchen shears. "Don't draw attention to yourself. It's embarrassing for us to explain to you." So I became a ghost. I learned to move without sound. I learned to anticipate needs before they were spoken. But what they did not account for was that ghosts watch, and ghosts listen. While they slept, or while they attended galas to keep up the charade of their high society status, I was awake in the attic. I had salvaged an old laptop Caleb threw away because the screen had a crack in it. I fixed the screen with parts I ordered using a prepaid Visa card I found on the sidewalk 3 years ago. I tapped into the neighbor's Wi-Fi network. The signal was weak, but it was enough, every night, from midnight until 2 in the morning. I was not Evelyn the servant. I was a student. I devoured free online curriculums. I learned forensic accounting from MIT OpenCourseWare. I studied corporate law through Harvard's free audit programs. I learned French and Mandarin through language exchange apps. Typing silently so the click of the keyboard would not travel through the floorboards. They told me I was stupid, that my brain was slow and heavy, but in the dark, I realized my mind was a knife, and every book I read was a whetstone. The sun begins to bleed through the kitchen windows, casting long shadows across the island. It is 7 o'clock. The family descends. Arthur comes first, checking his watch. He ignores me, picking up the warm, ironed newspaper without a word of thanks. Sylvia follows, her silk robe trailing behind her. She inspects the avocado slices. She does not smile, which means they are acceptable. Then comes Caleb. He looks hungover. His skin is pale, his eyes rimmed with red. He reeks of stale bourbon and expensive cologne. He tosses a leather portfolio onto the counter, narrowly missing the juice pitcher. "Coffee, black, now," he grunts, sliding onto a bar stool. I place the cup before him silently. He takes a sip and grimaces, but he does not complain, which is the closest I get to a compliment. He opens his portfolio and stares at a document, rubbing his temples. "Useless lawyers," he mutters. "They can't even draft a simple liability waiver for the merger." I glance at the paper from the corner of my eye as I wipe down the counter. It is a standard contract for a partnership deal Vance Global is trying to close to keep the lights on. I see the error immediately. It is glaring, in the indemnity clause. The phrasing shifts the burden of debt entirely onto Vance Global in the event of a third-party lawsuit, rather than splitting it with the partner. If Caleb signs this, and the deal goes south, our parents, fake as their wealth is, will be destitute within a week. I know I should stay silent. I know the rules. But the exhaustion has lowered my guard, and a part of me, the part that takes pride in the knowledge I have stolen, wants to test the waters. "The indemnity clause is backward," I say. My voice sounds raspy to my own ears. I have not used it since yesterday. Caleb stops rubbing his temples. He looks up at me, his eyes narrowing. "What did you say?" "Paragraph 4, Section B," I say, keeping my eyes on the counter I am wiping. "It says the first party assumes all liquidity risks. Vance Global is listed as the first party. It should be the second party, or at least mutual. You are signing away your protection." Caleb stares at the paper. He traces the lines with his finger. I see the realization hit him. I see the panic. And then, instantly, the defensive anger. He knows I am right. He knows the stupid orphan just saved him from a multi-million-dollar mistake. "Mother!" Caleb shouts, his voice cracking. Sylvia rushes in from the dining room, looking alarmed. "What is it? Is the coffee cold?" "Evelyn is reading my private documents," Caleb sneers, pointing a shaking finger at me. "She's hovering over me, breathing down my neck, trying to give me business advice. It's distracting. I can't think of her lurking like a vulture." Sylvia turns to me. Her face twists into a mask of disgust. She does not ask if I was right. She does not care about the contract. She cares about the hierarchy. "You insolent little girl," she hisses. stepping into my personal space. She smells of rosewater and malice. Who gave you permission to speak? Who gave you permission to look at things that are above your station? I start. But she cuts me off. You were just proving why nobody wanted you. She snaps. You think because you can read a few words you understand how the world works. You are here to clean. Evelyn, you are here to serve the people who actually matter. If I catch you looking at Caleb's papers again, I will have Arthur remove the light bulb from your attic. You can sit in the dark until you learn your place. I look down at my shoes, cheap canvas sneakers that are falling apart. Yes, Mother, I'm sorry. Don't call me that, she corrects instinctively. Get out of my sight. Go clean the pool house. We have guests coming tonight. And I want it spotless. I retreat. I walk out the back door, the morning air hitting my face. My hands are shaking, not from fear, but from a cold, simmering rage. I was right. I am smarter than Caleb. I am more capable than Arthur. I am stronger than Sylvia. But in this house, the truth does not matter. Only power matters. I spend the day scrubbing the pool tiles on my hands and knees. The sun beats down on my back. I watch the water ripple, imagining what it would be like to just keep walking into the deep end and never come up. But I don't. I have survived 24 years. I can survive one more day. By evening, the house is transformed. Caterers, external ones. For the heavy lifting have arrived. The dining room is set with good silver. I am banished to the kitchen to handle the dishwashing, invisible again, but the acoustics in the Vance Manor are peculiar. The vents carry sound from the dining room directly into the pantry where I'm stacking plates. I hear the clinking of glasses. I hear Arthur's booming, jovial laugh, the fake one he uses for investors. We have a very special announcement tonight, Arthur says. The room goes quiet. We are thrilled to bring two great families together. To the future. To the future. The guests chorus. My son, Caleb, Arthur continues, has officially asked for the hand of a young woman who represents the very best of the next generation. We are proud to announce the engagement of Caleb Vance to Isabella Sterling. I freeze. The plate in my hand feels suddenly heavy. Sterling, Novus Tech. Isabella Sterling is the daughter of Marcus Sterling, the tech mogul whose software runs half the planet. He is a man worth billions, a man known for his ruthlessness in business and his recluse nature in private. I lean against the cold metal shelving. This is not a marriage. This is a merger. My parents have finally found a way to plug the holes in their sinking ship. They have sold Caleb to the highest bidder. And I realize, with a sinking feeling in my stomach, that my life is about to get much harder. The wedding of the century means the preparation of the century, and the servant in the attic will be the one expected to build the stage upon which they will shine. I look at my reflection in the dark window of the pantry. A ghost stares back, but for the first time, the ghost looks angry. Novus Tech, Marcus Sterling. These are people who look at details. These are people who notice things. Maybe, just maybe, this is the mistake Arthur and Sylvia have been waiting to make. The house began to vibrate with a frenetic, terrified energy. If the weeks before were a slow simmer of oppression, the days leading up to the wedding were a boiling pot threatening to blow the lid off the entire Vance facade. To the outside world, this was a union of love between the handsome scion of a finance family and the heiress of a tech empire, inside the walls of the manor. It was a hostage negotiation. The hostage was Vance Global, and the ransom was Isabella Sterling's dowry. I knew the numbers because I was the one shredding the bank notices, while Arthur drank scotch and stared at the wall. I was the one collecting the mail from the box at the end of the long driveway before the neighbors could see the red urgent stamps. The boutique investment firm my parents claimed to run was hemorrhaging money. They were not just broke. They were millions of dollars in debt. They were leveraging the house, the cars, and even the future promise of this marriage to keep the lights on. If Caleb did not say "I do" within the month, the Vances would be destitute. My workload exploded. I stopped sleeping in 4-hour blocks and started snatching 20-minute naps whenever I collapsed. My day began at 3 in the morning and ended whenever Sylvia decided her panic attacks had subsided, usually around 1 o'clock the next morning. I became a machine of ink, thread, and polish. It started with the invitations. Sylvia refused to pay a professional calligrapher because the quote was $3,000. She bought a calligraphy set from a craft store, threw it on the kitchen table, and told me to figure it out. "You have neat handwriting," she said, dismissing me with a wave of her manicured hand. "Do not ruin the cardstock. It is imported from Italy and costs $5 a sheet." For 3 nights, I sat at the kitchen island, my fingers stained black with ink, copying names from a guest list that read like a who's who of the American elite. Senators, CEOs, old money families from Connecticut, and new money tech giants from Silicon Valley. I wrote until my hand cramped into a claw. I wrote until the names blurred together. But as I wrote, I memorized. I memorized addresses. I memorized connections. I built a map of the world I was forbidden to enter. Then came the dress. Not the bride's dress Isabella would be wearing a custom Vera Wang, but Sylvia's. She needed a mother-of-the-groom gown that screamed opulence, but she could not afford the $20,000 price tag of the latest runway pieces. She went into the deep storage closets and pulled out a vintage Dior gown from the 90s, a relic from when they actually had money. "It is tight in the waist," she told me, thrusting the heavy silk into my arms. "Let it out, and add crystals to the bodice. It needs to catch the light. I want to outshine the bride's mother." I became a seamstress. I spent hours hunched over the champagne-colored silk, unpicking stitches with a microscopic needle, terrified that one slip would tear the fabric and end my life. I sewed hundreds of Swarovski crystals onto the bodice, one by one, my eyes burning from the strain. The irony was suffocating. I was covering a woman in fake diamonds while wearing a t-shirt with holes in the armpits. As the wedding drew closer, the house filled with florists, planners, and caterers. This presented a logistical problem for Arthur and Sylvia me. I could not be seen. A servant in the Hamptons was expected to be a uniformed professional, usually speaking Spanish or Portuguese, with a legitimate agency badge. I was a pale, gaunt, 24-year-old American woman with no paperwork, wearing rags, who looked disturbingly like she belonged in the family photos rather than the scullery. Sylvia's solution was a lie so cruel it took my breath away. I was in the kitchen, scrubbing the grout on the floor with a toothbrush because Sylvia felt the steam cleaner was too loud, when the wedding planner, a sharp-eyed woman named Jessica, walked in. "I haven't met your house staff properly," Jessica said, looking at the back of my head. "We need to coordinate the vendor meals." Sylvia stepped in front of me, blocking Jessica's view. "Oh, do not worry about her. That is Evelyn. We keep her out of charity. Poor things. She has a severe, highly contagious fungal dermatitis. It is quite hideous. We try to keep her away from people for their own safety." I froze. My skin was clear, pale, yes, and dry from cheap soap. "But clear," Jessica gasped, taking a step back. "Oh, I see. That is very generous of you. We are saints," Sylvia sighed. "But please, if you see her, do not approach her, and certainly do not let the Sterlings see her. Marcus is such a germaphobe. It would ruin the festivities if he knew we had a walking biohazard in the house." From that moment on, I was a leper. When the doorbell rang, I had to run to the cellar or the attic. If I had to move through the house, I was forced to wear a surgical mask and a headscarf. Casting my eyes down, I became a shadow in my own prison, but shadows hear things. One afternoon, I was dusting the vents in the hallway outside the master bedroom. The vacuum was off, so the house was silent. Through the gap in the mahogany doors, I heard Arthur and Sylvia arguing. Their voices were low, laced with a panic that had nothing to do with money. "We should have sent her away," Arthur hissed. "Just for the week. Put her in a motel in Jersey, if Marcus sees her." "And risk her running off," Sylvia shot back. She is 24. Arthur, if she steps foot outside this property without us, she might figure out she can just keep walking. Besides, she has no money, no ID. It is not about her running, Arthur said, his voice trembling. It is about the face. You saw the way Marcus looked at the engagement photos. He is obsessed with the past. If he sees the resemblance. He won't, Sylvia snapped. She is a ghost. She is a contagious, ugly little servant girl. And after the wedding, once the check clears and the merger is signed, we can deal with the problem permanently. Maybe send her to that facility in Nevada your brother told us about, the one for troubled adults. I stopped breathing. The duster shook in my hand. They were not just hiding me because I was an embarrassment. They were hiding me because they were afraid. They were afraid of Marcus Sterling seeing my face, why I looked nothing like Arthur or Sylvia. But that had always been explained away by my orphan status. Why would a tech billionaire from California care about the face of a servant in New York? My heart hammered against my ribs. I needed to know more, but the sound of Caleb's heavy footsteps on the stairs sent me scurrying into the linen closet. Later that day, I was sent to the deep storage room in the basement to find a silver punch bowl Sylvia wanted to display. The room was a graveyard of the Vance's past lives' boxes of tax records, broken furniture, and damp-smelling rugs. I moved boxes aside, coughing in the dust, in the corner, under a pile of moth-eaten velvet curtains. I found a small wooden box. It was not one of Sylvia's jewelry boxes. It was plain, unfinished wood. I opened it. Inside lay a single hairpin. It was not costume jewelry, even in the dim light of the basement bulb. The stone pulsed with a deep, vibrant green. It was an emerald, roughly the size of my thumbnail, set in tarnished silver that was twisted into the shape of a blooming vine. I reached out and touched it. A shock, like static electricity but warmer, ran up my finger. I picked it up. It felt heavy, real. As I held it, a strange sensation washed over me. Not a memory, exactly, but a feeling. The smell of lavender, the sound of a humming melody, a feeling of safety that I had not known in 2 decades. I wanted to put it in my pocket. I wanted to keep it. It felt like mine. But the fear was ingrained too deep. If Sylvia found this on me, she would call the police. She would say I stole it. I would go to jail. And in this country, a poor thief has no voice against a rich victim. With a trembling hand, I placed the hairpin back in the box and shoved it deep behind a stack of old magazines. I could not take it, but I could not forget it. Hey, Cinderella, I spun around. Caleb was leaning against the doorframe of the storage room, holding a tumbler of whiskey. He was wearing a tuxedo shirt, undone at the collar. He looked at me with a sneer that was equal parts amusement and disdain. You are still down here. Mom wants the punch bowl, not a history lesson. I found it, I said, my voice barely a whisper. I pointed to the silver bowl on the shelf. Caleb walked over, kicking a box of books out of his way. He grabbed the bowl, then paused, looking at me. He stepped closer. I backed up until I hit the cold concrete wall. You know, he said, swirling his drink, I am going to be a very rich man in 48 hours. Isabella is pliable. She thinks I am her Prince Charming. Once the accounts are joint, I will have access to the Sterling Trust. He took a sip, his eyes raking over my oversized t-shirt. And do you know what the first thing I'm going to do is? He asked. I shook my head. I am going to clean the house. He smiled, showing his teeth. Mom and Dad like having a pet to kick around, but me, I find you depressing. You mope, you stare, you are a drag on the atmosphere. Once I'm in charge, you are out. Street, shelter, I don't care. Just gone. He laughed, a dry barking sound. Imagine that. Evelyn, you, out in the real world. You don't even know how to buy a subway ticket. You will be eaten alive within a week. He turned and walked away, the punch bowl under his arm, whistling the wedding march. I slid down the wall until I hit the floor. The dust rose around me. He was going to throw me out. After 24 years of servitude, after raising him, feeding him, lying for him. He was going to discard me like a wrapper, but as the tears pricked my eyes, something else ignited in my chest. It was the same heat I felt when I touched the emerald hairpin. If I stayed, I was dead. If I left, I might die. But at least I would die on my feet. I needed to run. I needed to get out before the wedding was over. But how I had $0. I had no driver's license, no social security card, no birth certificate. I was a non-person. If I walked out the gate, the police would pick me up as a vagrant, or worse, return me to the Vances. I needed a plan. I needed leverage. And as I thought about the fear in Arthur's voice when he spoke of Marcus Sterling, and the strange familiarity of the emerald hairpin, I realized that the wedding might not just be Caleb's payday. It might be my battlefield. I wiped my eyes with the back of my dirty hand. I stood up. I was not going to run into the dark. I was going to wait for the light. I was going to see this bride's father, who terrified my parents so much. And if I was going down, I was going to make sure the Vance family went down with me. The engagement party was a beast that roared on the other side of the swinging kitchen doors. I was trapped in the scullery, a windowless room that smelled of industrial dishwasher soap and half-eaten shrimp cocktails. My hands were pruned and raw from hours of scrubbing crystal flutes, every time the door swung open to admit a waiter carrying a tray of dirty dishes. A blast of air conditioning and the sound of a string quartet drifted in, mocking me. I could hear the clinking of glasses, the murmur of polite conversation, and the occasional burst of laughter that sounded sharp and brittle, like breaking glass. I was invisible, but I was essential. The pile of dirty plates was a tower that never stopped growing. I scrubbed with a mechanical rhythm. Circle, rinse, rack, circle, rinse, rack. My mind had gone blank. A defense mechanism I had perfected over the years to keep from screaming. Then, the rhythm broke. A crash echoed from the main ballroom. It was not the small tinkle of a dropped fork. It was the heavy, wet smash of a tray going down, followed by a collective gasp that sucked the air out of the room. The string quartet stopped playing abruptly. The silence that followed was heavy and terrifying. The kitchen door flew open so hard it banged against the wall. Sylvia Vance stormed in. She was not the composed, smiling hostess I had seen practicing in the mirror earlier. Her face was a mask of sheer panic, her eyes wide and wild. She looked like an animal caught in a trap. "You," she hissed, pointing a trembling finger at me. "Get the towels, the microfiber ones, now." I dropped the sponge and scrambled to the cabinet, grabbing a stack of white clothes. What happened? Did Caleb? "Shut up," she shrieked. She grabbed my arm, her nails digging into my skin. "It is Marcus Sterling. That idiot hired waiter spilled a tray of Cabernet on him, on his suit, on the floor. It is a disaster." She looked at me, her eyes darting over my face, assessing the danger. I could see the gears turning in her head. She needed a servant immediately to clean up the mess before the stain set. But she had banished me. She had told the world I was a diseased recluse. "Put this on," she commanded, snatching a black baseball cap from the hook where the gardener left his gear. She jammed it onto my head, pulling the brim down low over my eyes. Then she reached into her pocket and pulled out a disposable surgical mask, the kind we kept for dusting. "And this, cover your face, do not speak, do not look at anyone. You go out there, you clean the floor and his shoes, and you get back in here before anyone realizes you are human. Do you understand?" "Yes," I whispered, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I put on the mask. It smelled of lint and fear. I felt like a criminal, or perhaps an executioner. Sylvia shoved me toward the door. "Keep your head down," she hissed. "If you ruin this, Evelyn, I swear to God I will leave you on the side of the highway tonight." I pushed through the swinging doors and stepped into the ballroom. The transition was jarring. The light was blinding, reflecting off the crystal chandeliers and the polished marble floors. The air was cool and smelled of expensive perfume and roast beef, but the atmosphere was frozen. The guests were arranged in a wide circle, staring at the center of the room. I kept my eyes fixed on the floor. Watching my own canvas sneakers move across the marble, I wove through the crowd, feeling the weight of 100 gazes sliding over me. They were not looking at me. They were looking at the disaster. In the center of the circle stood a man. I saw his shoes first. Hand-stitched Italian leather, polished to a mirror shine, now splattered with dark red drops of wine. The liquid had pooled around his feet, staining the white marble like blood. Next to him, a young waiter was on his knees, frantically apologizing, picking up shards of glass with trembling hands. "I am so sorry. Sir, I slipped. Leave it," a deep voice rumbled. It was calm, authoritative, and utterly terrifying. "Get up." The waiter scrambled away, looking like he might vomit. Arthur Vance was already there, hovering around the man like a nervous fly. "Mr. Sterling, please, allow us. It was an accident. We have fresh clothes for you upstairs. We can—" "It is fine. Arthur," the deep voice said again. "It is just wine." I reached the center of the circle. I dropped to my knees without a sound. I did not look up. I could not. I was a machine. I was a tool. I placed the microfiber towels on the puddle, soaking up the red liquid. The wine was cold and sticky on my fingers. "Here," Sylvia's voice was high and shrill above me. "Our girl will take care of it. She is very thorough." I moved to the shoes. I dabbed at the leather carefully, terrified of making it worse. My breath was hot inside the mask. The brim of the gardener's hat cut off my peripheral vision, creating a tunnel where only the shoes and the hem of the charcoal gray suit pants existed. "I can do that myself," the man said. He shifted his weight, pulling his foot back slightly. "Nonsense," Arthur insisted. "Let her do her job. She enjoys being useful." I flinched at the words. I enjoy being useful. As if servitude was a hobby I had chosen, I kept scrubbing. The stain on the leather was stubborn. I leaned in closer, my nose inches from the expensive fabric. I focused entirely on the task, blocking out the whispers of the crowd, blocking out the shame that burned the back of my neck. "That is enough," the man said. His voice was directly above me now. "Stand up, child." The command was gentle, but it carried a weight that made disobedience impossible. I froze. I was not supposed to stand. I was supposed to be a shadow that scrubbed and vanished, but he had told me to stand. I gathered the soiled towels in my left hand. I began to rise. My legs were shaky. As I stood, I kept my head bowed, intending to turn and bolt back to the kitchen immediately. But fate is a cruel writer. As I straightened up, the brim of the oversized baseball cap caught on the silver cufflink of the man's jacket. It was a small snag, a tiny friction of fabric against metal. But as I pulled back to retreat, the hat did not come with me. It was ripped from my head. Tumbling to the floor, my hair, which I had tied back loosely, spilled out. The sudden exposure felt like a physical blow. I gasped, and my instinct was to look up to see what had happened. I lifted my head, and for the first time in my life, I looked into the eyes of Marcus Sterling. The room ceased to exist. The chatter, the music, the clinking glass had all vanished into a vacuum of silence. He was taller than I expected. His hair was silver, thick and swept back. His face was lined with the kind of weathering that comes from deep thought and heavy burdens. Not from age, but it was his eyes that pinned me to the spot. They were gray, a piercing, stormy gray that looked like the ocean before a hurricane, and they were looking at me with an expression I could not comprehend. He did not look at me with the disdain of the Vances. He did not look at me with the pity of the guests. He looked at me with a sudden, violent recognition. It was as if someone had punched him in the chest. The wine glass he was holding in his right hand slipped from his fingers. It hit the marble floor with a shatter that sounded like a gunshot. Red wine splashed onto his pants again, but he did not flinch. He did not blink. His gaze was locked onto my face, tracing the line of my jaw, the shape of my brow, the curve of my nose. I saw his pupils dilate. I saw his mouth open slightly, a word forming on his lips that never made it to the air. His hand, the one that had dropped the glass, reached out involuntarily, trembling in the air between us. "You," he breathed. The word was so quiet, only I heard it. Panic exploded in my chest. I was exposed. I was seen. I was breaking the rules. Sylvia lunged forward. She moved with the speed of a desperate predator. She shoved herself between me and Marcus, breaking eye contact. "Oh, dear clumsy girl," Sylvia screeched, her voice cracking. She grabbed my shoulder and dug her fingers in hard enough to bruise. "I am so sorry. Marcus, she is not all there." Arthur appeared on my other side, creating a wall of Vance bodies to block me from view. Yes, a tragedy. Really. We took her in from an institution. Mental deficiencies. She gets confused. She stares. It is quite unsettling. "She is harmless," Sylvia added quickly, pushing me backward. "Just slow, very slow. We tell her not to bother the guests, but she forgets. Go back to your room." She shoved me hard. I stumbled back, nearly tripping over the hem of my own oversized trousers. "Wait," Marcus said. His voice was louder now, cutting through the Vance's babble. "Arthur, move!" Marcus took a step to the side, trying to look around Sylvia's shoulder. His face was pale. He looked like a man who had seen a ghost. "Who is she? What is her name?" "No one." Arthur laughed nervously, stepping in front of Marcus again, blocking his view. "Just the help. Marcus, nobody you need to worry about. We will have her disciplined. Please, let's get you a fresh drink. Come this way." "Her name," Marcus repeated, and this time there was steel in his voice. "Arthur, who is she?" "Evelyn," Sylvia shouted, looking at me with eyes that promised murder. "Get out now." I turned and ran. I did not look back. I sprinted through the crowd, ignoring the startled gasps of the women in gowns. I pushed through the swinging doors of the kitchen and kept going. I ran past the scullery, past the pantry, and out into the back hallway. I needed darkness. I needed to hide. I collapsed against the wall in the service corridor, gasping for air. My heart was beating so fast it made my vision blur. He had seen me. He had looked at me. Why did he look at me like that? Why did he drop the glass? Rich men do not drop crystal glasses because a servant looks at them. They do not tremble. They do not ask for names. I pressed my hands against my burning cheeks. The image of his face was burned into my mind. The gray eyes, the shock. It mirrored the feeling I had when I held the emerald hairpin. It resonated, a frequency that matched my own. I heard footsteps approaching from the kitchen. I held my breath, shrinking into the shadows of the corridor. The kitchen door swung open. But it was not Sylvia coming to punish me. It was a man in a sharp black suit, Marcus Sterling's personal assistant. I had seen him earlier, carrying Marcus's tablet. He did not see me in the shadows. He stood by the kitchen door, looking around, his phone raised. Through the crack in the door, I saw Marcus Sterling still standing in the middle of the ballroom. He was not listening to Arthur, who was still rambling. Marcus was looking at the kitchen door. He was looking at the place where I had vanished. He raised his hand slightly, a subtle gesture. He tapped his own ear, then pointed at the door. The assistant in the hallway nodded. He lifted his phone. I realized with a jolt of terror that he was not looking for me to scold me. He was positioning himself. He was waiting. A moment later, the assistant turned and walked briskly down the hallway, directly toward where I was hiding. I scrambled back, pressing myself into the alcove of the dumbwaiter. He passed me. He did not see me. But as he walked by, I saw the screen of his phone. It was a grainy, zoomed-in photo. It was me. It was a photo taken just seconds ago in the ballroom. The moment my hat had fallen off, it was blurry, but my face was visible, my eyes, my fear. The assistant stopped at the end of the hall and dialed a number. "Run it," the assistant whispered into the phone. "Facial recognition. The boss says it is priority 1. Do not sleep until you get a match. He thinks he knows her." I slid down the wall to the floor, wrapping my arms around my knees. Arthur and Sylvia had lied. They said I was slow. They said I was a nobody. But Marcus Sterling did not believe them. He had seen something in my face that terrified my parents and captivated him. I was not just a servant anymore. I was a target, and for the first time, I wondered if I was also the arrow. The silence in Vance Manor following the engagement party was not peaceful. It was heavy, like the air before a tornado touches down. The house felt like a bomb that had been armed, the ticking sound reverberating in the walls. After the guests had departed and the last catering truck had rumbled down the driveway, Arthur Vance summoned me to the library. He did not ask me to sit. He sat behind his massive oak desk, a glass of amber liquid in his hand, his eyes bloodshot and filled with a cold, terrifying calculation. Sylvia stood by the window, refusing to look at me, her arms crossed tight across her chest as if she were holding herself together. "You have become a liability, Evelyn," Arthur said. His voice was devoid of the anger I expected. It was practical, transactional. "We spent 24 years keeping you invisible, and in 5 seconds, you managed to draw the attention of the one man who looks at everything under a microscope." "It was an accident," I said, my voice barely a whisper. The hat fell. "Accidents are for people who can afford mistakes," Arthur replied, taking a slow sip of his drink. "You cannot. We are finalizing the arrangements. Once the wedding is concluded, once Caleb and Isabella are on their honeymoon, you will be taking a trip." My stomach dropped. A trip. "There is a manufacturing facility in a country you would struggle to find on a map," Arthur said, swirling the ice in his glass. "They have very strict labor laws, or rather, a lack of them. They need workers who do not ask questions and do not have passports. You will be fed, you will have a bed, and you will work until you pay off the debt you owe us for your existence. Do not pack a bag. You won't need one." He dismissed me with a wave of his hand. I walked up the stairs to my attic, my legs feeling like lead, a labor camp. They were going to traffic me. They were going to sell me into slavery to bury their secrets. But fear, when it reaches a certain saturation point, turns into something else. It turns into hyper-awareness. I did not sleep that night. I sat by the circular window of my attic, looking out at the dark driveway. The moon was obscured by clouds, but the streetlights cast long, skeletal shadows across the lawn. That was when I saw them. At 2:00 in the morning, a black sedan drove slowly past the gates of the manor. It did not stop. It did not speed up. It cruised by at a crawling pace, its windows tinted so dark they looked like oil slicks. 10 minutes later, it returned, coming from the other direction. At 3:00, a different car, this one a heavy SUV, parked down the street, just at the edge of the property line. The engine was off, but I saw the faint glow of a cigarette cherry from the driver's side window. These were not creditors. The people Arthur owed money to were loud. They banged on doors and made threats. These people were silent. They were watchers. Are they watching the Vances, I wondered? Or are they watching me the next morning? The atmosphere in the house shifted from anger to paranoia. Arthur was jumpy. He kept checking the blinds. Sylvia was medicating herself with wine at 10 in the morning. They left the house around noon for a meeting with their lawyers, leaving me alone with my chores. I knew this was my chance. I did not go to the kitchen. I went straight to Arthur's study. I knew he locked the door, but I also knew that the lock on the library door was a simple pin tumbler mechanism that could be picked with a modified paperclip. I had practiced it 100 times in my head watching tutorials online. Today, my hands shook, but the lock clicked open. The room smelled of cigars and desperation. I moved to the desk. It was cluttered with overdue notices and legal threats, but I ignored those. I was looking for the cause of their fear. I checked the drawers, locked. I checked the safe, too complex for me to crack quickly. Then I looked at the trash can. Arthur was a man who believed himself untouchable, so he was often careless with his garbage. He had a shredder, but he was lazy. Sitting right on top of the pile of crumpled papers was a document that had been torn in half, then into quarters, by hand. I fished the pieces out and laid them on the rug. I pieced them together like a puzzle. It was an invoice from a private investigation firm called Argus Eyes, but the date was not recent. The date was from 20 years ago. Subject Sterling. Marcus. Objective timeline verification. Maternity ward security protocols. Status surveillance complete. No witnesses were found. I stared at the paper. Why was Arthur Vance, a man who at that time was trying to build a hedge fund, hiring a private investigator to look into Marcus Sterling's security protocols at a hospital 20 years ago? And why did he tear it up now? He must have been purging his files, cleaning house, removing evidence. Evidence of what I memorized the name of the PI firm and shoved the torn pieces deep into my pocket. I slipped out of the study and relocked the door just as I heard the front gate open. While I was piecing together trash in New York, I did not know that 30 miles away, inside the glass fortress of Novus Tech, another investigation was taking place. I learned of this only much later, but it is crucial to understand the storm that was gathering. In his office on the 50th floor, Marcus Sterling stood before an easel. On it rested a painting covered by a velvet cloth. He pulled the cloth away. It was an oil painting of a woman. She was young, perhaps 22. She had dark hair that tumbled over her shoulders and eyes that held a mixture of kindness and defiance. It was his late wife, captured months before she died. In his hand, Marcus held a tablet. On the screen was the grainy, zoomed-in photograph his assistant had taken of me the night before. My face was half-shadowed, my hair messy, my eyes wide with terror. He looked at the painting, then he looked at the tablet. He traced the line of the jaw on the painting. Then he zoomed in on the tablet. The curve was identical, the shape of the eyes not the color, but the shape was a perfect match. "The age matches," Marcus said to the empty room. "The timing matches." He swiped the screen to another image. It was a background check on the Vances. Arthur and Sylvia Vance, no biological children. Adoption record sealed. Date of adoption, 3 days after the incident. Marcus Sterling, a man who built an empire on data and logic, felt his hands tremble. He picked up his phone and dialed a number that did not appear in his contacts list. "I need a sample," he said into the phone. "I don't care how you get it. Hair, saliva, anything. Get inside that house." Back at the manor, the afternoon dragged on. I was in the garden, hiding behind the overgrown hedges near the gazebo. I had stolen a book from the library during my earlier raid, a battered copy of Madame Bovary in the original French. It was risky, but my mind was starving. I needed to escape, if only in my head. "What are you doing?" I jumped, nearly dropping the book. Standing over me was Isabella Sterling. She had arrived without me hearing her car. She was dressed in a white tennis outfit, looking every bit the billionaire heiress. But her face was bored and lonely. She looked at me, then at the book in my hands. "I am sorry, Miss Sterling," I stammered, scrambling to hide the book behind my back. "I was just taking a break. I will get back to work." "Let me see that," she said, reaching out. She was not aggressive, just curious. I handed her the book. She looked at the cover, then flipped it open. Her eyebrows shot up. "French?" she asked. "You read French?" "I taught myself," I said, looking at my shoes. "Dictionaries, online videos." Isabella looked at me with a new expression. It was the first time she had looked at me as a human being and not a prop in her wedding. "Read a line, please," I hesitated, then took the book back. I read a sentence aloud, my accent rusty but correct. "La parole humaine est comme un chaudron fêlé où nous battons des mélodies à faire danser les ours, quand on voudrait attendrir les étoiles." Isabella stared at me. "Human speech is like a cracked cauldron on which we beat out melodies to make bears dance. When we would like to move the stars to pity," she sighed. "I flunked French in boarding school 3 times. You are the maid, and you read Flaubert." "I am not the maid," I said, the words slipping out before I could stop them. "I am the sister." Isabella blinked. "Right, Caleb's adopted sister, the one with the—" She waved her hand near her face. The skin condition. Do I look like I have a skin condition? I asked, lifting my chin. Isabella studied my face. No, you look tired and sad, but your skin is fine. She frowned, a shadow of confusion crossing her face. My dad is acting so weird lately. He keeps asking about you. My heart skipped a beat. About me? Yeah, Isabella said, sitting down on the stone bench next to me. After the party, he grilled me for an hour, asking if I had ever seen you before, asking if you looked like Caleb, asking how the Vances treat you. He is obsessed. He even has his security team looking at satellite maps of this house. She laughed. But it was a nervous sound. I told him he is just having pre-wedding jitters, but he is a billionaire. You know, when he gets a bone, he doesn't let go. Why would he care about the groom's sister? The pieces of the puzzle in my mind slammed together with a deafening click. The invoice from 20 years ago about security protocols, the way Marcus looked at me, the questions, the black cars outside. He was not looking into the Vances because of business. He was looking for someone. Isabella, I said, my voice trembling. Did your father lose someone a long time ago? Isabella's face went rigid. The casual friendliness vanished. That is not something we talk about. Please, I pressed. It is important. He lost his wife, Isabella said softly. My mom. She died when I was a baby, and there was a baby, a twin. She died too, or that is what he told me. Complications at the hospital. A twin. I felt the blood drain from my face. I looked at Isabella. We did not look exactly alike. She had her father's nose. And I had, whose nose did I have? But there was something. The shape of the jaw, the hairline. Isabella, I started, reaching out to her. What do you think you are doing? The voice cracked like a whip. We both jumped. Caleb was standing at the edge of the gazebo. His face was twisted in fury. He marched over, grabbing me by the arm and hauling me to my feet. Caleb, stop, Isabella cried, standing up. We were just talking. Talking? Caleb sneered. He looked at me with pure hatred. You are not paid to talk. Evelyn, you are paid to scrub toilets. He turned to Isabella, his face instantly softening into a mask of charming concern. Babe, you shouldn't be around her. Mom told you, right? She is a pathological liar. She makes things up to get sympathy. It is part of her condition. She was reading French. Caleb, Isabella said, narrowing her eyes. She doesn't seem crazy to me. That is because she is good at it, Caleb said, tightening his grip on my arm until I whimpered. Go inside. Isabella, I need to deal with the staff. Isabella looked at me, then at Caleb. She looked unsure, but the habit of obedience was strong. Don't hurt her, Caleb. Of course not, he smiled. I am just going to give her a chore list. Isabella walked away, looking back once. As soon as she was out of sight, Caleb spun me around and slapped me across the face. The sound was loud in the quiet garden. My head snapped to the side. I tasted copper. You listen to me, you little rat, Caleb hissed, his face inches from mine. You stay away from her. You stay away from Marcus. If I hear one word come out of your mouth that isn't, yes, sir, I will kill you myself. Do you understand? I won't send you to a camp. I will bury you in the woods. He shoved me backward. I fell into the hedge, the branches scratching my arms. Get inside, he spat. And burn that book. I watched him walk away. I touched my bleeding lip. He was terrified. They were all terrified. Isabella had a twin who supposedly died, but Arthur Vance had investigated the hospital security, and I had an emerald hairpin that felt like a memory. I was not just a servant. I was a ghost that refused to stay dead. And now, I knew exactly who I was haunting. The invitation arrived like a velvet-wrapped summons from a king. It was not a request. It was a mandate. Marcus Sterling wanted to finalize the wedding menu, but not with the catering company. He insisted on a private tasting at the Sterling Imperial, his 5-star flagship hotel in Manhattan. And there was a specific stipulation that made the blood drain from Sylvia's face. He wanted to meet the culinary talent who had prepared the roasted red pepper bisque served at the engagement party. He was talking about me. I had made that soup in a rush, trying to salvage a disaster when the original caterer's appetizer spoiled. I did not know Marcus Sterling had even tasted it, but now he was using it as a hook to drag me out of the shadows. "We cannot take her," Arthur paced the living room, sweating through his shirt. "It is a trap. He knows. He suspects. We have to take her," Sylvia countered, her voice tight with hysteria. "If we say no, he pulls the funding. If we say she is sick, he sends a doctor. He is testing us. Arthur, we have to show him that she is nothing, just a servant. If we hide her now, we admit guilt." So, the preparation began, but it was not the preparation of a debutante. It was the defacing of a prisoner. Sylvia sat me down in the kitchen chair under the harsh fluorescent light. She opened a makeup kit, but instead of blush and lipstick, she pulled out contour shades meant for stage actors. She darkened the hollows of my eyes, making me look gaunt and sleep-deprived. She used a brow pencil to create the illusion of a unibrow. She roughed up my hair with hairspray until it looked like a bird's nest, then tied it back in a severe, unflattering bun. "There," she said, stepping back and surveying her handiwork with a cruel satisfaction. "You look like a witch. No man looks twice at that." She threw a shapeless, stained chef's jacket at me. It was 3 sizes too big, swallowing my frame and hiding any hint of a figure. "Keep your mouth shut," Arthur warned as he shoved me toward the car. "You speak when spoken to, and you answer in monosyllables. If you try anything at all, remember that nobody will look for a runaway servant." The drive to Manhattan was silent. I sat in the back of the SUV, watching the skyline approach. It felt like approaching a fortress. My heart was not beating. It was vibrating. I touched the spot behind my ear, a nervous habit I had developed since childhood. We entered the Sterling Imperial through the service entrance. The kitchen was a cathedral of culinary excellence. It was vast, gleaming with copper and steel, filled with the purposeful shout of, "Yes, chef," and the clatter of pans. But when we arrived, the executive chef cleared the room. "Mr. Sterling wants a private audience," the chef said, eyeing my disheveled appearance with distaste. "Table 4 is set in the tasting alcove." The alcove was a small, glass-walled room off the main kitchen. Marcus Sterling was already there. He stood by the window, looking out at the city traffic. When we entered, he turned. He was wearing a casual navy suit, no tie. He looked tired. His eyes scanned Arthur and Sylvia briefly, then landed on me. He did not recoil at my appearance. He did not look at the dark circles or the messy hair. His gaze went straight to my eyes, searching for the person beneath the paint. "Thank you for coming," Marcus said. His voice was warm, but there was a tremor in it that I recognized. It was the sound of a man holding back a tidal wave. "It is our pleasure, Marcus," Arthur said, his voice overly loud. "This is the girl, Evelyn. She makes a decent soup, though she is hardly a chef. We brought her as you asked, but really, we should trust your hotel staff for the main event." "The soup was nostalgic," Marcus said, walking closer. "It reminded me of a recipe my wife used to make. I wanted to thank the cook personally." He stopped 2 feet in front of me. The air between us felt charged, like the moment before a lightning strike. "Hello, Evelyn," he said. "Sir?" I whispered, looking at the floor. "Arthur, Sylvia," Marcus said without turning his head. "Would you mind giving us a moment? I would like to discuss the ingredients she used. It is a matter of culinary curiosity." "We will stay," Sylvia said quickly, stepping closer to me. "Evelyn gets nervous around strangers. She is prone to panic attacks. It is better if we are here to manage her." Marcus turned to them, his expression hardened. The benevolent billionaire vanished, replaced by the predator who ate companies for breakfast. "I am not asking for permission. I am asking for privacy. 5 minutes. Wait in the corridor." It was not a request. It was an order given by a man who owned the building, the block, and essentially, the bank account of the people he was talking to. Arthur paled. He grabbed Sylvia's arm. "Of course. 5 minutes. We will be right outside." They retreated, but Sylvia shot me a look that promised pain if I stepped out of line. The heavy glass door clicked shut. We were alone. Marcus Sterling did not ask about the soup. He did not ask about the ingredients. He took a step closer, invading my personal space in a way that should have been threatening, but instead felt like a shield being raised around me. "I am not going to hurt you," he said softly. I looked up. The gray eyes were swimming with tears. He reached out a hand, then pulled it back, as if afraid I would break. "I need to ask you something," he said, "and I need you to tell me the truth. Not the truth they told you to say, the real truth." I nodded, unable to speak. "Do you—" He paused, his voice cracking. He took a breath and started again. "Do you have a mark, a small scar? Right here." He touched the spot behind his own right ear. My breath hitched in my throat. The room spun. That was my secret. It was a birthmark, a small, crescent-shaped indentation of pale skin behind my right ear that I always hid with my hair. Sylvia used to call it the devil's mark. "How do you know that?" I whispered. Marcus closed his eyes, and a single tear escaped, tracking down his weathered cheek. "Because I have one. My father had one. It is a genetic trait, a Sterling trait." He opened his eyes. They were pleading. "Let me see. Please." I hesitated. The fear of Arthur and Sylvia was a cold chain around my neck. But the pull of this man, the heat of the connection I felt, was a fire that melted the metal. Slowly, with a trembling hand, I reached up. I brushed aside the messy strands of hair Sylvia had glued in place. I turned my head slightly, exposing the skin behind my ear. Marcus leaned in. He let out a sound that was half sob, half laugh. It was the sound of a man who had been holding his breath for 20 years finally exhaling. "Elara," he whispered. The name hung in the air like a prayer. He reached out and cupped my face with both hands. His palms were warm and rough. He did not care about the fake dark circles or the drawn-on unibrow. He looked at me as if I were the most precious thing in the universe. "I knew it," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I knew it the moment I saw you drop that towel." "I don't understand," I stammered, tears spilling from my own eyes, cutting tracks through the makeup. "They told me I was an orphan. They said nobody wanted me." "They lied," Marcus said fiercely. "I wanted you. Your mother wanted you. We never stopped looking." He leaned closer, his forehead almost touching mine. 22 years ago. There was a fire at the hospital, in the maternity ward. It was chaos, smoke, alarms, people running. When the firefighters put it out, one crib was empty. They told me you had perished in the smoke. They told me there was nothing left to bury. He shook his head, but I never believed it. A father knows. I felt a hole in the world where you were supposed to be, and for 22 years, I have been searching for the ghost that fits that hole. He ran his thumb over my cheekbone. "You are not Evelyn Withers. You are Elara Sterling. You are my daughter." My knees gave out. I would have fallen if he had not caught me. He held me up, his grip strong and sure. It was the first time in my life I had been held by a parent. It felt alien and yet completely right. It felt like coming home. "We have to go," I gasped, clutching the lapels of his jacket. "Arthur, he will take me away. He is going to send me to a camp." "He will not take you anywhere," Marcus growled, a dangerous light entering his eyes. "I will call the police right now. I will have this building surrounded." "No," I said, gripping him tighter. "You can't. Not yet." "Why?" he demanded. "I found you. I am not letting you go back to those monsters." "Because they will deny it," I said, my mind racing. "They have papers, fake papers, but they look real. If you call the police now, Arthur will claim I am mentally unstable, that you are a grieving father projecting onto a servant. It will be a legal mess. He will hide me. He will make me disappear before the DNA test is done." Marcus looked at the door. We could see Sylvia pacing, her face pressed against the glass like a gargoyle. "We need proof," I whispered. "Irrefutable proof. And we need to destroy them. If we just arrest them, they might get out on bail. They might hurt someone else. I want them to pay. I want them to lose everything." Marcus looked at me. He saw the fire in my eyes, his fire. He nodded slowly. "What do you need?" he asked. "Time," I said. "And a way to talk to you." Suddenly, the door handle turned. "Time is up," Arthur's voice boomed as he shoved the door open. He looked panicked, his eyes darting between us. "We have to go. Traffic. We cannot be late for the doctor." Marcus stepped back instantly, his mask of the polite billionaire sliding back into place, though his eyes remained burning hot. "Of course," Marcus said, his voice cool. "Thank you for the insight into the soup. Evelyn, it was most illuminating." Arthur grabbed my arm, his grip painful. "Come on, move." He dragged me toward the door. I stumbled, looking back at Marcus. He stood still, his hands clenched into fists at his sides, watching his daughter being hauled away like a sack of garbage. As Arthur yanked me past Marcus, I felt a hand brush against mine. It was quick, a sleight of hand that would have made a magician proud. Something soft and silky was pressed into my palm. "I will see you at the wedding," Marcus said, his voice carrying a double meaning that only I understood. "I look forward to it." Arthur shoved me out into the corridor. Sylvia was waiting, looking suspicious. "What did he ask?" she hissed. "Did you say anything?" "He asked about the paprika." I lied, my voice trembling. "He asked if I used smoked or sweet." Sylvia let out a breath of relief. "Stupid rich people, obsessing over spices while their world burns." They marched me out to the car. I sat in the back seat, my hand clenched tight into a fist. Only when we were on the highway and the interior lights were off did I dare to open my hand. It was a handkerchief, fine white linen, embroidered with the initials M.S. I unfolded it carefully in the dark. Inside, written in black ink, was a phone number, and below it, 3 words, "You are loved." I pressed the cloth to my face, inhaling the scent of expensive cologne and fatherhood. I cried silently in the dark, letting the tears wash away the fake makeup. They thought they were taking their prisoner back to the dungeon. They did not realize they were transporting a spy. The connection had been made. The circuit was closed. And the energy that was about to flow through it would burn the House of Vance to the ground. The grandfather clock in the hallway struck 2 o'clock in the morning. The sound vibrated through the floorboards of the attic, a rhythmic tolling that felt like a countdown. I was wide awake, sitting on the edge of my cot, clutching the linen handkerchief Marcus Sterling had pressed into my hand. The house was a tomb. Arthur and Sylvia were asleep in the master suite, fortified by sleeping pills and expensive scotch. Caleb was likely passed out in his room, dreaming of spending money he did not have. I needed to make the call. I crept down the servants' staircase, my bare feet silent on the wood. I knew every creak in this house. I knew that the 3rd step from the top would groan if you stepped on the center. So I hugged the wall. I knew the pantry door squeaked unless you lifted the handle upward before turning. I moved like smoke, a skill I had perfected over 24 years of trying to be invisible. The kitchen was bathed in the ghostly blue light of the appliance displays. I moved to the wall phone, an old landline that Arthur kept because he believed cell signals caused brain cancer. I lifted the receiver. The dial tone hummed in my ear, a lifeline to a world I was forbidden to enter. My fingers trembled as I dialed the number written on the handkerchief. 1 ring. "Speak." The voice was instant. He had been waiting. "It is me," I whispered, my voice barely audible over the hum of the refrigerator. "Evelyn," Marcus Sterling breathed. The relief in his voice was palpable. "Are you safe?" Did they hurt you? I am safe, I said. They are asleep. But we don't have much time. You said you knew. You said I was Alara. I know it in my gut, Marcus said, his voice steel hard. But in a court of law, feelings do not matter. We need science. I need a sample. Evelyn, I need your DNA to run against mine. If we have a match, I can bring the FBI to your door within the hour. I can't get out, I said, looking at the security keypad by the back door. The perimeter alarm is set. If I open a window or a door, the sirens go off. I know, Marcus said. My security team has analyzed the schematics of the house. It is a fortress. We need a way to get something out without you leaving. I looked around the kitchen, my eyes landing on the pile of clothes draped over the chair by the door. It was Caleb's dry cleaning pile. He had thrown his suit jacket there earlier, complaining that he spilled champagne on it and needed it pristine for a luncheon tomorrow. The dry cleaner, I said, a plan forming rapidly in my mind. Caleb sends his suits to a place on Main Street, Prestige Cleaners. He is sending a batch out tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock. The driver comes to the gate to pick it up. I can have someone there, Marcus said immediately. What will you do? I will put a sample in the inside pocket of his gray Armani jacket, I said, the one with the champagne stain on the lapel. Hair, Marcus commanded. Pluck it from the root, at least 5 strands. Wrap it in a tissue. Can you do that? Yes. Do it. My assistant will be the one driving the dry cleaning van. He will intercept the real driver. Just get it in the pocket. I will, I promised. Evelyn, Marcus said, and his voice softened. Be careful, if they catch you. They won't, I said. They think I'm stupid. That is my superpower. I hung up the phone. I did not waste a second. I reached up and grabbed a cluster of hair behind my ear. I gritted my teeth and yanked. The pain was sharp and stinging, bringing tears to my eyes. But it felt like victory. I checked the roots. White bulbs were visible. Perfect. I wrapped the strands in a piece of paper towel. I walked over to Caleb's pile. I found the gray jacket. I slid my hand into the inner breast pocket and tucked the small white bundle deep into the corner. Step 1 was complete. Now came the waiting. The next morning was a blur of nervous energy. I watched from the kitchen window as the dry cleaning van pulled up to the gate at 8 o'clock. It was a white van, identical to the usual one, but the driver was wearing a cap pulled low. I recognized the sharp jawline of Marcus's assistant. Sylvia marched out with the garment bags. She handed them over. Complaining loudly about a missing button on a previous order, the assistant nodded, took the bags, and drove away. The package was secure, but I could not just sit and wait. The conversation with Marcus had unlocked a door in my mind. He said I was kidnapped from a hospital. Arthur and Sylvia had always told me I was abandoned. If Marcus was right, then Arthur and Sylvia were not just cruel guardians. They were felons, and felons kept records. At 10 o'clock, Arthur left for the golf club to hustle some potential investors. Sylvia went to the spa for an emergency facial. I was alone in the house. I went straight to the library. I had opened the door before, but I had never attempted the safe. It was a heavy steel box hidden behind a false panel in the wainscoting. I knew where it was because I had seen Arthur adjusting the panel once when he thought I was asleep in the hallway. I knelt before the safe. It was a digital keypad, 4 digits. I thought about Arthur. He was a simple man, driven by greed and vanity. He would not use a random number. He would use something that mattered to him. I tried his birthday. Red light. I tried Sylvia's birthday. Red light. I tried the date they bought the house. Red light. The keypad beeped a warning. One more wrong try and it would lock down for 24 hours. I closed my eyes. What was the most important day in Arthur Vance's life? It wasn't his wedding. It wasn't my arrival. It was the day he thought he became rich. It was the day Vance Global was incorporated. I had seen the framed certificate on the wall 1,000 times. July 14th, 1998. I typed in 0714. Click, the heavy door swung open. My heart hammered against my ribs. I reached inside. There were stacks of cash emergency funds for their inevitable flight. I assumed, There were velvet jewelry boxes, and at the back, there was a thick manila envelope. I pulled it out. It was not sealed. I opened it and slid the contents onto the floor. The first document was a birth certificate. It looked real, but the ink was slightly different in the name field. Evelyn Withers. The rest of the details, hospital, doctor, time of birth were blank or generic. Then I found the adoption decree. It was a forgery. A bad one. The seal of the state was pixelated, as if printed from a low-quality image. It was dated 3 days after the hospital fire Marcus had mentioned. But the real smoking gun was at the bottom of the pile. It was a letter, handwritten on lined paper. The paper was yellowed with age. The ink faded. It was addressed to Mr. Marcus Sterling. I began to read, and the air left my lungs. We have what you are looking for. The fire did not take everything. She is alive. She is with us. If you want to see her again, it will cost you $5 million. Instructions to follow. Do not contact the police, or the girl disappears forever. The letter was never sent. There was no stamp, no envelope. It was a draft. I looked at another piece of paper clipped to it, a newspaper clipping from 22 years ago. The headline screamed, "Sterling vows to destroy anyone involved in hospital tragedy. Billionaire hires private army to hunt for clues." I realized the truth in a sickening wave of nausea. Arthur and Sylvia had stolen me or found me with the intention of selling me back to my father. It was a kidnapping for ransom. But when they saw Marcus Sterling's reaction, his rage, his power, the private army he hired, they got cold feet. They were small-time grifters, not master criminals. They were terrified that if they reached out, Marcus would trace them and crush them. So they kept me. They were stuck with the evidence of their crime. They couldn't return me without admitting guilt. They couldn't kill me because they were cowards. So they decided to hide me in plain sight, punish me for their own fear, and raise me as a slave to pay for the inconvenience of my existence. You monsters, I whispered to the empty room. You absolute monsters. I took photos of every document with an old digital camera I had scavenged from the trash years ago. Then I put everything back exactly as I found it. I wiped the keypad. I replaced the panel. I retreated to the attic. I felt sick, but I also felt powerful. I was not a charity case. I was a stolen treasure. The wait for the DNA results was agonizing. The hours dragged like years. I scrubbed floors. I polished silver. I listened to Sylvia berate me about the dust on the mantelpiece. Every time she spoke, every time she called me useless, I touched the memory of that letter in my mind. Just you wait. I thought, just you wait. At 3 o'clock the next morning, the kitchen phone rang again. One short ring. I was there instantly. Evelyn. I am here. It is done, Marcus said. His voice was broken, sounding like he had been weeping for hours. The lab rushed it. They ran it 3 times because I did not believe it could be so perfect. He took a jagged breath. 99.999% match. You are Alara. You are my daughter. I slid down the wall until I hit the floor. The tears came silently, hot and fast. It was real. I was not crazy. I was not unwanted. I am coming, Marcus said, his voice shifting into a growl of pure aggression. I have the NYPD commissioner on the other line. I have a tactical team standing by. We are going to kick down that door and drag them out in chains. I will be there in 20 minutes. No, I said. The silence on the line was stunned. What did you say? I said no. I repeated, my voice steadying. Do not come tonight. Evelyn, are you insane? You are living with kidnappers. I am not leaving you there for one more second. If you arrest them tonight, I said, it will be a news story for a day. They will hire lawyers. They will claim they found me and raised me out of love. They will spin a story. They might even get a plea deal. I stood up, gripping the phone cord. I don't want them arrested in their pajamas, I said cold and clear. I want them destroyed. I want the world to see them for what they are. I want to strip them of the one thing they value more than money, their reputation. What are you proposing? Marcus asked. The wedding, I said. It is in 2 days. Half the world will be watching. The governor will be there. The press will be there. Arthur and Sylvia think they are about to ascend to royalty. I want to pull the rug out from under them when they are standing on the highest peak. It is dangerous, Marcus said. If they suspect, you know. They suspect nothing, I said. They are too arrogant. They think I'm a beaten dog. Let them think that for 48 more hours. I took a deep breath. Bring the police to the wedding. Surround the church, but let the ceremony start. Let them think they have won, and then let me speak. There was a long pause. I could hear Marcus breathing. I could feel his fatherly instinct warring with his respect for the woman I had become. You are your mother's daughter, he whispered finally. She had a temper like a storm, too. Is that a yes? I asked. It is a yes, Marcus said. But I will have eyes on you every second. If they so much as raise a hand to you, the deal is off, and I am sending in the cavalry. Deal, I said. I love you. Elara, he said. 2 days, and then you are coming home. 2 days, I echoed. I hung up the phone. I stood in the dark kitchen, the heart of the house that had been my prison. The fear was gone. In its place was a cold, calculating anticipation. Arthur and Sylvia Vance had raised a servant, but they had forged a queen, and in 48 hours, the queen was going to demand her execution. The last 48 hours before the wedding were a masterclass in deception, but for the first time in my life, I was not the victim of the lie. I was the architect. I moved through the Vance manor with the fluidity of water. I did not sulk. I did not drag my feet. I did not stare at the floor with the sullen resentment that usually earned me a slap from Sylvia. Instead, I was prompt. I was efficient. I anticipated their needs before they even voiced them. When Sylvia dropped her earring, I was there to catch it before it hit the floor. When Arthur's throat cleared, a glass of water appeared at his elbow. To them, this was victory. They believed they had finally broken me completely. They believed the threat of the labor camp had severed the last tendon of my resistance. See, Sylvia said to Arthur over breakfast, gesturing to me as I poured her coffee with a steady hand. I told you, she just needed a firm reminder of her reality. She knows her place now. She is finally useful, Arthur grunted, reading a document on his tablet. Good. Keep her that way. We need everything perfect for tomorrow. I don't want any embarrassments. I kept my face blank, a smooth mask of servitude. Inside, I was screaming with laughter. They were so busy congratulating themselves on breaking the horse that they did not notice the horse was leading them off a cliff. The trap for Arthur was sprung at noon. Cash. Liquid capital, Arthur said, pacing the room. But here's the beauty of it. To get the transfer released immediately, I had to sign a few disclosure forms, just standard banking nonsense verifying our current assets and the solvency of Vance Global. I smiled internally. It was a kill shot. Vance Global had no assets. It was a shell company filled with debt. By signing a document stating that the company was solvent to secure a $10 million investment. Arthur had just committed federal wire fraud and bank fraud on a massive scale. He had put his signature on a felony. Marcus had handed him the rope, and Arthur had tied the noose, climbed the scaffold, and kicked away the chair. We are untouchable, Arthur declared, raising his glass. The Sterlings are buying our legitimacy. After the wedding, we can use that money to pay off the sharks, and we will still have millions left to play with. And the girl? Sylvia asked, lowering her voice, though not enough. The transport is arranged, Arthur said dismissively. Monday morning, 4 o'clock. A private contractor will pick her up. By the time Caleb and Isabella land in Bora Bora, Evelyn will be processing raw rubber in Southeast Asia. I wiped a speck of dust from a porcelain figurine. Monday morning, they were planning to dispose of me like a bag of trash. But Monday would never come for Arthur Vance. The second phase of the plan involved the bride. Isabella Sterling arrived at the manor at 3 o'clock for the final dress rehearsal. She looked nothing like a woman about to marry the man of her dreams. Her skin was pale, her eyes were puffy, and she moved with a lethargy that spoke of deep, Internal conflict. Caleb met her at the door. He looked like a prince in his tailored linen suit, handsome and charming. "Bella," he exclaimed, grabbing her waist and pulling her in for a kiss. "You look gorgeous. Tired, but gorgeous. Don't worry. After tomorrow, you can sleep on the beach for 2 weeks." Isabella flinched slightly at his touch. "Caleb, I need to talk to you about the guest list. I saw some names." "Boring." Caleb laughed, cutting her off. "Leave the logistics to the planners. Babe, you just need to look pretty. Hey, I have to take a call with my broker. Go find Mom. She wants to show you the flower arrangements." He patted her on the head, actually patted her, like a dog, and walked away, pulling out his phone. Isabella stood there, humiliated and alone in the grand foyer. I stepped out of the shadows. "Miss Sterling," I said softly, "would you like some tea? You look like you need a moment." Isabella looked at me. Her eyes were swimming with unshed tears. "I don't want tea. I want a cigarette, and I don't even smoke." "Come with me," I said. "There is a quiet place in the solarium. No one goes there." She followed me. She seemed relieved to be away from the suffocating energy of the house. The solarium was hot and smelled of damp earth and orchids. I led her to a bench hidden behind a wall of ferns. "Why are you being so nice to me?" Isabella asked, sitting down heavily. "Caleb says you are difficult." "Caleb says a lot of things," I said, standing before her. "Caleb says he loves you. Caleb says he is a successful businessman. Caleb says I am crazy." I reached into the pocket of my apron. I pulled out an old, cracked smartphone. It was Caleb's old phone, the one he had discarded months ago. He thought he had wiped it. He was wrong. "I need you to listen to something," I said, "and I need you to promise me that you will not scream." Isabella frowned. "What is this?" "The truth," I said. I pressed play. The recording was from 3 weeks ago. It was Caleb talking to his best friend, a sleazy stockbroker named Trent. I had recorded it while I was cleaning under his bed, and he was pacing the room on speakerphone. Trent's voice. "So, you are really going through with it, the Sterling girl." "She is kind of plain, isn't she?" Caleb's voice. "She is a golden goose. Trent, who cares about the face when the bank account has 9 zeros? She is a stupid, naive cash cow. I just have to play the devoted husband for a year, maybe 2. Get my name on the trust fund. Get access to the liquidity." Trent. "And what about Jessica?" Caleb. "Jessica isn't going anywhere. She is meeting me in the city on Tuesday. I told Isabella I have a bachelor party. The cow believes anything I say. Once I secure the bag, I will stash Isabella in the country house and live my life. She is just the ticket, man, nothing more." I stopped the recording. The silence in the solarium was absolute. A single drop of water fell from a fern leaf onto the tile floor. Isabella was not crying. She was frozen. Her face had gone completely white, draining of all blood. She stared at the phone in my hand as if it were a poisonous snake. "He called me." Her voice was a whisper. "A cash cow." "He doesn't love you, Isabella," I said gently. "He loves your father's money. He loves the power your name gives him. To him, you are just an acquisition." Isabella stood up. Her hands were clenched into fists at her sides. She was trembling, not with sadness, but with a pure, white-hot rage that I recognized immediately. It was the Sterling rage. It was the same look Marcus had when he threatened to storm the house. "I am going to kill him," she said. Her voice was steady. "I am going to walk out there, and I am going to stab him with a pair of scissors." "No," I said, stepping in her way. "That is what a victim does. A victim lashes out. A queen exacts judgment." Isabella looked at me. "What are you talking about?" "Your father knows," I said. Isabella blinked. "My dad? Does he know about this?" "He knows everything," I said. "He knows about the fraud, he knows about the lies, and he knows about me." I took a step closer. He has a plan, Isabella, a plan to destroy them completely, to expose them in front of the entire world. But he needs you to be strong. He needs you to play your part. What part? She demanded. The bride, I said. Walk down that aisle. Let them think they have won. Let them taste the victory. And then, when the moment comes, you stand with us. You stand with your family. Isabella studied my face. She looked at my eyes, her father's eyes. She looked at the set of my jaw. Dad told me to trust you, she said slowly. He wouldn't say why. He just said, when you go to the house, find Evelyn. Listen to Evelyn. She took a deep breath, smoothing down the front of her dress. The trembling stopped. A cold mask settled over her features, identical to the one I wore. Okay, she said. I can do it. I can pretend. I have been pretending to like his mother for 6 months. I can pretend to love him for 24 hours. She looked at me, and for a moment, the barrier between mistress and servant vanished. You are not who they say you are you? She asked. No, I said. I am not. Good, Isabella said, because I always wanted a sister who could help me bury a body. She turned and walked out of the solarium. She walked differently. Her head was high. Her stride was purposeful. She went back to the living room, and I heard her voice, bright and fake, exclaiming over the flowers. The alliance was sealed. The night before the wedding, the Vances held a private celebration. Just the 3 of them. I served them vintage champagne in the library. To the Vances, Arthur toasted, his face red and shiny. To the return of our glory. To Novus Tech. Caleb laughed, clinking his glass. And to the stupidest investors on earth. And to silence, Sylvia added, looking directly at me. To a quiet house and a clean slate. They drank, they laughed, they planned their new lives. Arthur talked about buying a yacht. Sylvia talked about a summer home in Tuscany. Caleb talked about which model he was going to sleep with first once the honeymoon was over. I stood in the corner, refilling their glasses, invisible. Drink up. I thought, enjoy the taste. It is the last sweet thing you will ever taste. At midnight, the house finally fell silent. I climbed the stairs to my attic for the last time. I did not sleep. I packed nothing. I had nothing to take. The clothes I wore were theirs. The shoes were theirs. The only thing I owned was the emerald hairpin hidden in the basement and the linen handkerchief in my pocket. I stood before the small, cracked mirror propped up on the crate I used as a dresser. I looked at Evelyn Withers. I looked at the pale skin, the hollow cheeks, the eyes that had learned to look down. I looked at the servant who flinched at loud noises. I looked at the girl who had spent 24 years believing she was a mistake. Goodbye, I whispered to the reflection. I reached up and pulled the pins from my hair, letting it fall around my shoulders. I straightened my spine. I lifted my chin until I was looking down my nose at the glass. I was not Evelyn. I was Alara Sterling. I was the daughter of a Titan. I was the sister of a warrior. I was the survivor of a 24-year hostage situation. Tomorrow, I will not be serving the wedding cake. Tomorrow, I will be serving justice. I turned away from the mirror and walked to the window. In the distance, across the dark expanse of the Hamptons, I could see the faint lights of the Sterling Imperial Hotel rising like a beacon in the city skyline. My father was there. My sister was ready. The stage was set. The script was written. And the villains had no idea that the curtain was about to rise on their final act. The Crystal Cathedral was not merely a wedding venue. It was a monument to excess built on the edge of a cliff overlooking the Atlantic Ocean. The entire structure was composed of glass and steel, a transparent prism that caught the afternoon sun and fractured it into a million rainbows. Inside, the air was scented with imported white jasmine and the briny tang of the sea. 500 guests, the absolute apex of the American elite, filled the pews. There were senators shaking hands with tech moguls, Hollywood royalty nodding to Wall Street titans, and in the center of it all, Preening like peacocks in their finest plumage, were Arthur and Sylvia Vance. They had achieved their life's ambition. They were standing in the VIP receiving line, accepting congratulations from people who would not have looked at them twice yesterday. Arthur wore a tuxedo that cost more than a mid-sized sedan, his chest puffed out, his smile so wide it looked painful. Sylvia was radiant in the champagne silk gown I had spent 40 hours altering, the Swarovski crystals on her bodice catching the light and blinding anyone who looked too closely. They played the role of the benevolent, wealthy in-laws to perfection. "Oh, thank you, Senator," Sylvia trilled, her voice dripping with fake humility. "Yes, we are just so proud of Caleb. He and Isabella are a match made in heaven." I watched them from the shadows. My station was the service alcove near the north wall. Hidden behind a massive arrangement of white hydrangeas and orchids, Sylvia had been very specific about my role. "You are to serve the sparkling water and the champagne to the back rows," she had hissed at me in the car. "You do not move to the front. You do not speak to the guests. You keep your head down. If I see your face on the live stream, Evelyn, you will wish you were dead." I wore a black uniform that smelled of starch and mothballs. It was ill-fitting, the fabric scratchy against my skin, designed to strip away any hint of femininity or individuality. A white apron was tied tight around my waist, and my hair was pulled back so severely it pulled at my scalp. I was the help. I was the furniture. But today, being invisible was exactly what I wanted. The ceremony itself was a blur of rehearsed vows and orchestral swells. I watched Isabella walk down the aisle. She looked ethereal in white lace, but her face was pale, her expression unreadable. She did not look at Caleb with love. She looked at him with the cold calculation of a woman walking into a business deal she intended to sabotage. When she reached the altar, she glanced briefly toward my corner. It was a microsecond of connection, a silent nod of acknowledgement. "Be strong, sister." I thought Caleb, on the other hand, was acting his heart out. He wiped a fake tear from his eye when he saw her. He held her hands with a possessiveness that looked like affection to the crowd, but looked like ownership to me. He said, "I do," with the confidence of a man who was already spending the money in his head. When the ceremony concluded, the guests shifted to the reception area, which was technically the same space, just reconfigured as the sun began to dip below the horizon. Turning the sky into a canvas of violet and fire, the waiters circulated with trays of caviar and foie gras. The noise level rose, a hum of expensive conversation and laughter. I stood in my corner, holding a silver tray of untouched champagne flutes. My heart was beating a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs. "Wait for it," I told myself. "Wait for the signal." The master of ceremonies, a famous news anchor hired for the event, tapped the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," his voice boomed through the state-of-the-art sound system, "please take your seats. It is time for the father of the bride to give his toast." The room went quiet. The rustle of silk and the clinking of silverware died down. All eyes turned to the main stage. Marcus Sterling walked up the steps. He looked tired. He looked older than he had in the kitchen of the hotel 2 days ago. He wore a black tuxedo, but he had forgotten the boutonniere. He walked to the podium, gripped the sides with both hands, and looked out at the sea of faces. He did not smile. Arthur and Sylvia were seated at the head table. Right in the front row, they were beaming up at him, raising their glasses, expecting a speech that would cement their status in high society. Caleb was leaning back in his chair, his arm draped over the back of Isabella's seat, looking bored and triumphant. Marcus stood in silence for a long time. 10 seconds, 20 seconds, the silence stretched until it became uncomfortable. People began to shift in their seats. A nervous titter rippled through the back of the room. "I had a speech written for today," Marcus began, his voice low and raspy. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a stack of cue cards, and dropped them onto the floor. They scattered like white leaves. "But I find that I cannot read it," he said, "because it is a speech about happiness, and I am not happy." The smile on Arthur's face faltered. Sylvia stiffened. her hand gripping the stem of her wine glass. A wedding is supposed to be about joining families, Marcus continued, his voice gaining strength. It is about truth. It is about the future. But how can we build a future when the past is buried in a shallow grave? He looked directly at Arthur Vance. 22 years ago, Marcus said. My wife gave birth to twin daughters. A gasp went through the room. This was not public knowledge. The story had always been that his wife died in childbirth along with one baby, leaving Isabella as the sole survivor. There was a fire at the hospital, Marcus said. The room was deathly silent now. A chaotic, terrible night. When the smoke cleared, I was told that one of my daughters had died. I was told her body was lost to the ashes. I buried an empty casket. Arthur's face had gone the color of putty. He looked like he wanted to stand up, to stop this, but he was paralyzed by the weight of 500 stares. Sylvia was shaking her head slightly, a rapid, twitchy motion. Her eyes darting around the room as if looking for an exit. For 2 decades, Marcus said, his voice trembling with suppressed rage. I believed the lie. I believed my daughter was gone. But the universe has a way of correcting itself. The truth has a way of clawing its way out of the earth. He paused, and the air in the room felt electric. I did not lose my daughter to a fire, Marcus thundered, his voice echoing off the glass walls. I lost her to greed. I lost her to thieves who saw a helpless infant not as a human being, but as a lottery ticket. Caleb stopped slouching. He sat up, looking at his father-in-law with confusion and the dawn of fear. Isabella sat perfectly still, staring straight ahead, her hands folded in her lap like a statue of judgment. They took her, Marcus said, pointing a finger at the crowd, though he did not name names yet. They took her because they wanted a ransom, but when they realized that I would hunt them to the ends of the earth, they got scared. They were cowards, so they did not return her. They did not leave her at a church. They kept her. He leaned into the microphone, his voice dropping to a whisper that carried more power than a scream. They kept her as a slave. A murmur of shock and horror swept through the cathedral like a wave. People put their hands over their mouths. They raised my flesh and blood to scrub their floors, Marcus said, tears finally spilling onto his cheeks. They raised a princess to serve them hand and foot. They beat her with words. They starved her of love. They told her she was nothing. Arthur stood up. His chair scraped loudly against the floor. Marcus, he choked out, his voice cracking. Marcus, you are not well. We should... Sit down, Marcus roared. The command was so powerful that Arthur actually fell back into his chair. I have spent every day of the last 22 years wondering what she would look like, Marcus said, his breathing heavy. I hired artists. I hired forensic specialists. I asked them to take the face of my late wife and the face of my surviving daughter and tell me what the ghost looks like today. He raised a small remote control in his hand. This, Marcus said, is Alara Sterling. He pressed the button. Behind him, a massive LED screen, which was meant to display a montage of Caleb and Isabella's courtship, flickered to life. It was a single image. It was a digital rendering, a composite created by the best forensic artists in the world. It showed a young woman with dark hair, high cheekbones, and large, expressive eyes. It was a face of striking beauty, but also of deep melancholy. It was my face. It was not a vague resemblance. It was a mirror image. The artist had captured the arch of my brow, the shape of my chin, even the way my hair fell. The crowd stared at the screen. Then, slowly, heads began to turn. At first, it was just the people in the back row near me. A woman in a red dress looked at the screen, then looked at the servant girl standing in the shadows holding a tray of champagne. Her eyes went wide. She nudged her husband. He gasped. Then the ripple effect began. It spread through the room like wildfire. People turned in their seats. Whispers turned into pointing fingers. Oh my God, someone whispered near me. Look, it is her. another voice said. The maid. Look at the girl in the corner. Arthur and Sylvia turned around. They followed the gaze of 500 people. They looked past the flowers, past the guests, into the dark alcove where I stood. I did not hide. I stepped out from behind the hydrangeas. I walked forward, just one step, into the pool of light cast by the setting sun. I let the heavy tray of champagne tilt in my hand until it slid from my fingers. Crash! The sound of shattering crystal and silver hitting the stone floor was the period at the end of Marcus's sentence. I stood there, surrounded by broken glass and spilled wine, wearing the black uniform of a servant. I lifted my chin. I looked directly at Arthur and Sylvia. I did not blink. I did not tremble. I let them see the face on the screen. I let them see the face of the girl they had tormented. I let them see the face of the daughter they had stolen. The silence was absolute. The only sound was the wind howling outside the glass walls. Marcus Sterling looked at me from the stage. He nodded. A single, solemn motion. The play was over. The reality had begun. Evelyn, Marcus's voice boomed from the stage, cutting through the thick, suffocating silence of the cathedral. He extended a hand toward the darkness where I stood. Or, perhaps I should call you by the name your mother gave you before the fire tried to take you. Ilara, come up here. The sound of my name, my real name spoken aloud in front of 500 witnesses, acted as a key, unlocking the cage I had lived in for 2 decades. I stepped over the broken shards of crystal. The champagne soaked into the hem of my servant's trousers. But I did not look down. I fixed my eyes on Arthur and Sylvia Vance. They were frozen in their seats, their faces pale masks of terror, looking like gargoyles that had suddenly realized they were made of sand. I walked down the center aisle. The guests parted for me, pulling their expensive fabrics back as if I were carrying a contagious disease, or perhaps a divine fire. I could hear their whispers, a rising tide of shock and confusion. What is happening? Is that the maid? She looks exactly like the picture. When I reached the base of the stage, I stopped. I stood directly between the guests and the Vances. I was the barrier. I was the wall. I reached behind my back and undid the knot of the white apron. I let it fall to the floor. Then, I found the hidden Velcro seam of the shapeless black tunic Sylvia had forced me to wear. With one swift, violent motion, I tore it open. The black fabric pooled at my feet. Underneath, I was not wearing rags. I was wearing armor. It was a gown Marcus had smuggled to me in the dry cleaning van, hidden inside Caleb's suit bag. It was a floor-length sheath of silver silk that shimmered like liquid mercury. It fit me like a second skin, highlighting the posture I had corrected, the height I possessed, and the dignity I had reclaimed. I shook my hair loose, the dark waves cascading over my shoulders. I heard a collective gasp from the room. I was no longer the invisible servant. I was Sterling. I radiated the same cold, hard power as the man standing on the podium. "What the hell are you doing?" The scream came from Caleb. He jumped up from his chair, his face twisted into a snarl of confusion and rage. He looked at me, then at the guests, then back at me. "You little freak! Put your clothes back on! Get back in the corner!" He lunged toward me, his hand raised to strike. Forgetting that we were not in the kitchen anymore, he forgot that the cameras were rolling. "Sit down, boy," Marcus said. His voice was not loud, but it stopped Caleb in his tracks. "Or I will have security break your arm." Caleb froze, looking at the 2 large men in dark suits who had materialized at the edge of the stage. He backed away slowly, his eyes darting around like a trapped rat. Marcus pressed the button on his remote again. "You wanted to know why," Marcus addressed the crowd, his voice trembling with righteous fury. "You wanted to know why a billionaire would stop a wedding. Look at the screen." The image of my face disappeared. In its place, a document appeared. It was blown up to the size of a movie screen, every pixel sharp and damning. Genetic identity report. Subject: a Marcus Sterling. Subject B: Evelyn Withers. Ilara Sterling. Probability of paternity: 99.9999%. Science does not lie, Marcus said. But liars do. He clicked the remote again. The screen changed. This time, it was a video. The audio crackled through the speakers, loud and clear. It was a recording taken from inside the Vance library. It was grainy. Shot from a hidden camera, likely one of the ones Marcus's private investigators had planted days ago. On the screen, Arthur Vance was pouring a drink. Sylvia was pacing. Arthur's voice on screen, "We just have to hold it together until Sunday. Once the vows are exchanged, the money transfers trigger automatically. We get the 10 million injection." Sylvia's voice on screen. "And the girl? What if she talks? What if Marcus sees her?" Arthur's voice. "She won't talk. I told her I'm sending her to that processing plant in Laos, the one the cartel runs. She thinks she is going on a trip. She doesn't know she is never coming back. By the time anyone realizes she is gone, she will be a statistic in a third world country. We just need to dispose of the problem." Sylvia's voice. "It is a shame. She is a good cleaner, but you are right. We can't risk the kidnapping coming out. 20 years is a long time to go to jail." "Arthur." The video was cut to black. The silence in the Crystal Cathedral was shattered. It was not applause. It was a sound of pure, visceral horror. 500 people let out a noise that sounded like a physical blow. "Murderers!" someone shouted from the back. "Kidnappers." Sylvia Vance did not scream. She simply folded. Her eyes rolled back in her head, and she collapsed sideways in her chair, sliding to the floor in a heap of champagne silk. It might have been real. It might have been a performance. I did not care. Arthur Vance, however, was a cornered animal. He looked at the screen, then at the crowd, seeing his entire life disintegrate in seconds. The yacht, the status, the country club membership, it was all turning to ash. He roared. It was a guttural, primal sound. He grabbed a steak knife from the table and launched himself toward the stage. He was not aiming for Marcus. He was aiming for me. "You ungrateful bitch!" he screamed, his eyes bulging. "I fed you. I owned you." He made it 3 steps. Before he could reach the stairs, 2 blurs of motion intercepted him. Marcus's security detail moved with the efficiency of machines. One guard tackled Arthur around the waist, driving him into the stone floor with a bone-crunching thud. The knife clattered across the tiles, spinning to a stop at my feet. The second guard pressed a knee into Arthur's back, pinning him down as he thrashed and cursed, spitting foam and obscenities. "Get off me. Do you know who I am? I am Arthur Vance. You are a nobody," Marcus said from the podium, his voice ice-cold. "You are a ghost." In the chaos, Caleb stood alone. He looked at his mother on the floor, his father in handcuffs, and then he looked at his bride. He forced a smile onto his face, a desperate, frantic grin. "Bella," he stammered, holding out his hands. "Baby, listen, I didn't know. You know I didn't know. They lied to me too. I'm a victim here. We can fix this. We are still getting married, right? Are we still a team?" Isabella Sterling stood up. She looked like a marble statue of a goddess, beautiful and completely unyielding. She picked up the microphone from the table. She walked over to Caleb. She looked him up and down, from his perfectly coiffed hair to his expensive shoes. "Caleb," she said, her voice amplified through the speakers, steady and clear. "You are right. You are a victim. You are a victim of your own stupidity." She reached into the bodice of her dress and pulled out a folded piece of paper. She unfolded it slowly. "This," Isabella said, holding the paper up for the cameras, "is a bank transfer record from this morning. It shows a withdrawal of $200,000 from the wedding preparation fund. The fund my father set up." Caleb turned white. "Isabella, wait. And this," she continued, pulling out another paper, "is a receipt from an offshore gambling site. You bet against your own company's stock. Caleb, you bet that Vance Global would fail. You embezzled my family's money to bet on your own failure because you knew your parents were frauds." She dropped the papers. They fluttered to the floor. landing on top of the knife. "There will be no wedding," Isabella announced. "There will be no merger, and there will be no honeymoon." She reached up and unclasped the diamond necklace around her neck, a gift from the Vances. Likely bought with credit. She dropped it into Caleb's hand. "You can keep this," she said. "You are going to need it to pay your bail." Caleb stood there, holding the necklace, his mouth opening and closing like a fish on dry land. The crowd erupted into flashes of camera lights. Every second of his humiliation was being live-streamed to the world. Then, Isabella turned to me. She walked to the edge of the stage and held out the microphone. Her eyes were fierce, filled with a sisterly pride that warmed the cold places in my heart. "Your turn," she whispered. I took the microphone. It felt heavy in my hand. It felt like a weapon. I turned to face the wreckage of the Vance family. Arthur was being hauled to his feet by the guards, blood trickling from his nose. Sylvia was being fanned by a waiter, groaning as she came to. Caleb was staring at the floor, defeated. I walked closer to them. I wanted them to see me. I wanted them to see Alara. "For 24 years, I spoke, and my voice did not shake. It filled the cathedral, bouncing off the glass walls, drowning out the sound of the ocean. You told me I owed you. You told me that my life was a debt I could never repay. You told me that the roof over my head and the food on my plate were acts of supreme charity." I looked at Arthur. He stopped struggling and looked back at me, hate burning in his eyes. "You lied," I said. "You did not save me. You stole me. You did not raise me. You imprisoned me." I took a step closer, my silver dress flowing around me like storm water. "You stole a mother from her child. You stole a sister from her twin. You stole a father from his daughter. You took 24 years of birthdays, of Christmases, of laughter, and you replaced them with an iron and a scrubbing brush." I looked at Sylvia, who was now sitting up, weeping mascara-stained tears. "You called me a servant," I said softly. "But I was never your servant. I was your hostage. I was the shield you used to hide your crimes. I was the secret you kept in the attic because you were too cowardly to face the consequences of your greed." I looked up at the crowd, at the hundreds of witnesses who were clinging to every word. "Arthur and Sylvia Vance are not socialites," I declared. "They are human traffickers, they are kidnappers, and they are thieves." I turned back to them, delivering the final blow. "You told me that my value was $0, I said. "But you were wrong. My value is the end of your world." I pointed to the door of the cathedral, where the flashing blue and red lights of police sirens were now reflecting against the glass walls. "You wanted to live in a big house," I said. "You wanted to be famous. Well, congratulations. You are going to be the most famous inmates in the federal penitentiary, and your new house will have bars on the windows, just like the attic you put me in." I lowered the microphone. "The debt is paid," I whispered, only for them to hear. "And I am keeping the change." Arthur sagged in the grip of the guards. Sylvia began to scream, a high, thin sound of despair. Marcus stepped down from the podium. He walked over to me. He did not say a word. He simply opened his arms. I stepped into them. I buried my face in his shoulder. I felt his arms close around me, solid and safe. I felt Isabella's hand on my back. Behind me, the Vances were being read their rights. But I did not look back. I was done looking at the darkness. I was finally, after 24 years, looking at the light. The symphony of destruction that had begun with a dropped champagne glass concluded with the wail of sirens. It was a sound that shattered the last illusions of the Vance family, piercing through the glass walls of the crystal cathedral like a physical force. The peaceful sunset was replaced by the chaotic, strobing glare of red and blue lights, turning the wedding venue into a crime scene. This was not a random intervention. This was the trap Marcus Sterling had spent 48 hours constructing. He had not just invited the police, he had coordinated a federal takedown. The doors at the back of the cathedral burst open. It was not the gentle opening of ushers, but the forceful entry of authority. A dozen agents in windbreakers emblazoned with FBI and NYPD swarmed into the room, their movements precise and terrifying. The guests, the elite of New York society, shrank back in their pews, realizing that the scandal of the century was unfolding before their eyes. A man with silver hair and a badge hanging from his neck marched down the center aisle. It was the police chief himself, a man whose presence signaled the severity of the crimes. He walked straight past the stunned guests, straight past the trembling Caleb, and stopped directly in front of Arthur and Sylvia Vance, who were being held upright by Marcus's private security. "Arthur Vance, Sylvia Vance." The chief's voice was a hammer striking an anvil. "You are under arrest." Arthur, blood still trickling from his nose, tried to summon the ghost of his former arrogance. "This is a mistake. Do you know who I am? I am a personal friend of the mayor. I will have your badge for this." The chief did not blink. He pulled a folded piece of paper from his jacket pocket. "I have a warrant here issued by a federal judge, and the mayor is not going to help you with this. Arthur, not when the charges are this ugly." He began to read, his voice projecting clearly to the back of the room. "You are charged with the kidnapping of a minor in the first degree, false imprisonment, conspiracy to commit extortion, wire fraud, bank fraud, and tax evasion totaling over $15 million. The crowd gasped again. Kidnapping was one thing. $15 million in tax evasion was a language the wealthy guests understood intimately. It meant the Vances were not just criminals, they were failures. "Cuff them," the chief ordered. The metallic click-click of the handcuffs was the sweetest sound I had ever heard. It was the sound of 24 years of chains falling off my wrists and locking onto theirs. Sylvia let out a wail that sounded like a wounded animal. "No, my dress. You are hurting me. Caleb, do something. Tell them." She looked frantically for her son, her golden boy, her prince. But Caleb was not looking at her. He was trying to inch away toward the side exit, his face pale and sweaty. "Grab him too," the chief said, pointing a finger at Caleb. "What?" Caleb shrieked as an officer grabbed his arm and spun him around. "I didn't do anything. I didn't know about the kidnapping. I was a child. I am a victim too. You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit financial fraud, embezzlement, and being an accessory to human trafficking," the chief said calmly. "We have your signature on the fraudulent loan documents your father prepared yesterday, and we have witness testimony that you were aware of Evelyn's confinement and actively participated in her abuse and exploitation as an adult." "I was just following orders," Caleb screamed, struggling as the cuffs bit into his wrists. "They made me do it, Isabella. Tell them I am your husband." Isabella stood next to me, her arms crossed, her expression one of utter disgust. "You are not my husband. Caleb, you are just another bad investment." The three Vances were hauled together, a pathetic cluster of ruined finery. The champagne silk dress was crumpled. The tuxedo was stained with blood. The linen suit was twisted. They looked small. They looked weak, as the officers began to drag them toward the doors. Arthur dug his heels into the marble floor. He was desperate to have the last word, desperate to reclaim some shred of power in a situation where he had none. He twisted his head to look at me. "I saved you," Arthur screamed, spit flying from his mouth. "I took you in when you were nothing. I gave you a roof. I gave you food. I gave you a life. You ungrateful little rat. You owe me." The officers paused, struggling to move his bulk. The room went silent, waiting for my reaction. I walked toward him. I did not run. I did not shout. I walked with the slow, deliberate grace of a woman who owns the ground she stands on. My silver dress swished softly against the floor. I stopped 2 feet from him. I looked down at the man who had been the monster in my nightmares since I was an infant. "You did not give me a life, Arthur," I said. My voice was low, but in the silence of the cathedral, it carried to every corner. "You stole a life. You took a daughter from her father. You took a sister from her twin. You took 24 years of sunlight and replaced them with the darkness of an attic." I leaned in closer, so he could see the fire in my eyes, the fire of the sterling bloodline he had tried to extinguish. You treated me like a thing, I said. You thought I was an asset you could liquidate when you were done, but you forgot one thing about assets. Arthur, sometimes they appreciate the value, and sometimes they cost you everything you have. Arthur stared at me, his mouth opening and closing, unable to find a response to the truth. I am taking it all back, I said, my voice hard as a diamond. I am taking my name, I am taking my freedom, and I am taking your legacy. From this moment on, the name Vance means nothing but shame. Get them out of here, Marcus commanded from behind me. The officers shoved them forward. The doors burst open, and the flash of 1,000 cameras blinded them. The press had arrived. The live-stream helicopters were circling overhead. The walk from the cathedral door to the police vans was a gauntlet of humiliation. I watched on the large screen as they were paraded before the world. I saw Sylvia trying to hide her face with her cuffed hands. I saw Caleb weeping openly. I saw Arthur staring blankly ahead. A man who had finally realized that the nightmare he had been afraid of for 20 years had arrived. They were shoved into the back of the police vans. The doors slammed shut with a heavy, final thud. It was over. The tension in the room snapped. The guests began to murmur, then to talk, then to shout, but I tuned them out. I felt a hand on my shoulder. I turned. Marcus Sterling was standing there. He was crying, tears streaming openly down his face, unashamed. He did not look like a billionaire. He looked like a father who had just been given a miracle. "Elara," he choked out. He pulled me into a hug that threatened to crack my ribs. It was a desperate, fierce embrace, the kind that tried to make up for 22 years of missed birthdays and lonely nights. I buried my face in his chest, smelling the scent of sandalwood and safety. For the first time in my life, I allowed myself to be small. I allowed myself to be held. "I got you," he whispered into my hair. "I got you. You are never going back to that attic. Never." Then I felt another hand. Isabella joined the hug, wrapping her arms around both of us. "I always wanted a sister," she sobbed, laughing through her tears. "I just didn't think I would have to ruin my own wedding to get one." "You didn't ruin a wedding," I said, pulling back to look at her, wiping my own tears. "You stopped a funeral, my funeral." We stood there, the three of us, a broken circle finally made whole. The guests watched, the cameras rolled, but for us, the world had narrowed down to this single point of connection. 1 month later, the autumn wind whipped the leaves across the driveway of the Vance Manor in the Hamptons. The iron gates, usually polished and imposing, were now wrapped in yellow police tape. A large sign was affixed to the brick pillar, "Seized Property, U.S. Department of Justice." A black town car idled at the curb. I stepped out. I was not wearing a servant's uniform. I was wearing a tailored wool coat the color of camel hair, black trousers, and leather boots. My hair was cut in a sharp, chic bob that framed my face. I walked up to the gate. I looked at the house. It looked smaller than I remembered. Without the fear, without the looming threat of Sylvia's anger or Arthur's belt, it was just a pile of brick and mortar. It was just a building. The windows of the attic were dark. The kitchen where I had spent thousands of hours was empty. "Are you okay?" I turned. Isabella was leaning against the car, wearing sunglasses. She was holding a clipboard. "I am fine," I said, and I meant it. "Is the paperwork done?" "Signed and sealed," Isabella said, waving the clipboard. "Dad pulled every string in Washington. The assets were seized to pay off the tax debt and the restitution to you. The judge granted you the deed to the property as part of the settlement for the false imprisonment." "So it is mine," I said, looking back at the house. "It is yours," Isabella nodded. "To burn down, if you want. I brought marshmallows." I laughed. It was a real laugh, light and free. No burning. That is what they would have done. They wanted to destroy evidence. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the old emerald hairpin I had retrieved from the evidence locker, the only thing from my past that I had kept. I turned it over in my fingers. "I am selling it," I said. Isabella tilted her head. The hairpin. The house, I said. I am selling the property to the state. We are going to bulldoze this monstrosity, and on this land, we are going to build the Alara Center. A center for what? Isabella asked. For children like me, I said, looking at the attic window one last time. For the invisible ones, the ones trapped in foster care, the ones slipping through the cracks, the ones who think they are worth $0. We are going to give them a roof, yes, but we are also going to give them a voice, and we are going to teach them that they are not servants to anyone. Isabella smiled, a wide, brilliant smile that matched my own. Dad is going to love that. He might even pay for the bulldozer. He already offered, I said. I turned my back on Vance Manor. I did not look over my shoulder. There was nothing there for me anymore. The ghosts were gone. The fear was gone. Evelyn Withers had died in that cathedral, leaving only Alara Sterling to walk out into the sun. I walked back to the car. I climbed into the back seat next to my sister. Where to? The driver asked. Home, I said. And then, the future. The car pulled away, leaving the silent, empty house behind. As we drove down the road, the sun broke through the clouds. Illuminating the path ahead, I watched the scenery pass by the ocean, the trees, the open road. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with air that tasted of freedom. I was 24 years old, and my life had just begun. Thank you so much for listening to this story of justice and reclamation. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. Are you listening from a busy city, a quiet countryside, or maybe even while doing your own daily chores? Please let me know in the comments below. I read every single one of them. If you enjoyed seeing the Vances get what they deserved, please subscribe to the channel, Family Revenge Stories. Hit that like button to support our work, and smash the hype button to help this story reach even more people who need to be reminded that every voice deserves to be heard.